She was actually, Mia joined my student group when we did the finishes and all that, Jeremiah. Yeah.
So, we're here today, it's November 27th, we're here for the meeting that was supposed to take place last week on the 20th. It was snowed out. Let's begin with a pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. So I think the first thing is to approve our minutes from our last meeting. So with us here.
This should be the very beginning of your packet, the back of the agenda.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, may I have a motion, please? Any comment? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, so next, let's go on to project updates, and Greg, can you give us an update?
Oh, I'm happy to. So, the project's moving along. We are experiencing a few, weather-related site issues. If people haven't been aware, we've had a little bit of rain, some snow, and a few other wonderful things, which has actually made our site, quite wet, which has kind of pushed back some of our paving plans and some of our site work, which is not thrilling, but we have no choices when it comes down to weather. The buildings are moving forward. If you look at the high school, the second story is already on the east wing, and the floors are all poured. The roof work will be starting this week, so you'll see a new rubber roof going onto that building. If you go down to the elementary school, a lot of the exterior brickwork around the gymnasium is done. It looks great. Actually, I brought Al down today, and we walked the building. A lot of the interior petition work's all done, plumbing rough-ins. Actually, they just had a plumbing rough-in inspection, an electrical rough-in inspection, so they're moving interiorly quite well. Like I said, our biggest challenge right now is just to deal with the water conditions that have been kind of created at the site, which is unfortunately pushing paving and some of the other site work. But we're moving along. At this point, it doesn't look like that's going to impact our final schedule, but it certainly does make it an exciting time to try to figure out how to deal with it.
I'm assuming the rain and wetness hasn't brought up any new issues that we weren't aware of before, just made things.
No, it's made a really mess down there is the biggest problem. It's just not. And our water table, as you know, is extremely high, so just add that all together and you end up with soup. But other than that, we're moving ahead.
Will that affect the paving schedule at all?
Oh, yes, most definitely. We may not, we're still trying, and there's no promises, but we may not get the paving that we had anticipated doing at the high school done this year because of all the water. And the backfill materials that we have and stuff has just turned to soup, and so that impacts that.
Would you say highly unlikely?
I'm just not sure that we're gonna be able to get it done, dried out, and paved. We also deal with the fact that the paving plants close at a certain time. And we're knocking on that door right now. The elementary school, they're actually planning on starting paving this week. And I believe they're also working on that Saturday, and hopefully by Monday, we'll see some serious paving changes there. Again, weather does affect us here, so hopefully the weather just needs to remain dry, just no rain, So we will get that, but yeah, it's not looking good for high school paving right now.
And the downstream effect of that is if.
Right now, as of today, we talked about that at our meeting. It's not going to impact our ability. It's not impacting the schedule at this point. So that's a good part because we are still moving forward with other areas of the building. But it does increase the amount of activity we'll have to do in the spring for those areas.
Okay. questions on project updates? One more thing, Greg,
Sure.
as the public knows, we, shut down a week or two ago at the elementary for a day because of the sewer pipe. Can you explain
Correct.
the status of that and what the next steps are?
So, we have, what's that?
It's about a month ago.
Yeah, we've had two sewer incidents. One did require us to shut the school down because we couldn't get it cleared before school opened. As it's known, we have a line in the east wing side of the school that has a large dip and it's in rough shape. And it's now impacting, and what we're seeing is with the added water, the hydraulic effects of the water pushing up, it's finding gaps and things. We have sand entering the pipe, and as well as found some stones. So today we have a preliminary plan on how we'll attack replacing that line. It came out just today. It's going to the engineer's hands right now for review and finalized sketches, and then once we have that, we'll come up with a plan on how to do the timing of it, as well as cost implications. But we do have it. It's right there, and just waiting to go to the engineers. So we are working on a solution. The other thing that we're trying to do is we're bringing in a company every 2 weeks to jet the line clear, just to make sure that, or try to prevent additional problems, prevent medicine, if you want to call it that, so that we don't run into it, and hope for the best. And if we can get the rain to stop, then that can help too.
So just so the committee and public's clear on this, so, originally after we had done, I shouldn't say originally, after we had done the last round of camera work on that line, we were of the mindset, I guess, at that point, that we may be able to replace a small section of it. Now, I guess this is the proposal is to replace the whole line, is that it?
No, this is actually, and give Ekman some kudos and John DeLoya. We talked about that they wanted to try to come up with a plan that didn't have to replace the entire line, as that line is extremely deep and running right down the center of the corridor. So they worked to come up with an idea, again, subject to the engineer's approvals, to actually run a new line in a section of the building where we have the dips and the problems that we already know that are there, and reroute the flow in a different direction, so that we're not having to have it quite as impactful to or installing a new drain line. So that's what the plan is. It's going forward to the engineers right now, and so we're hoping that the engineers will bless it and do their final, sizing and pitch calculations. But the idea is to abandon the old line completely in place and not dig down 7 feet, which the line is, and look at something that's 3 feet down, which is a lot easier to deal with than a 7-foot line, which requires shoring, and not to mention the amount of water, dewatering it right now would be very, very difficult.
So Ekman's done a proposed solution. The engineers, next step, the engineer's gonna look at it.
Correct.
If the engineer approves it, then it goes to pricing, is that?
Well, the engineer is going to basically redraw it, do all the calculations, and put out a drawing that they have. This is Ekman's proposal idea for that. Once they have that in place, Ekman will work on creating the cost structures to have this work done. We also have to talk about scheduling and how that impacts school operations, if we're gonna be able to do some of it now, if we can't, and how that looks. But that's kind of what we're working on. And like I said, we're trying to do some preventative stuff so that we can at least keep functional without having any problems.
But just for clarity's sake, the entire line in that wing will be replaced.
The entire line will be replaced in that wing, yes. The other wing does not have the issues. Obviously it affects it because it's all one continuous line, but
Greg, is it the whole line, or does it stop at those doors? So where you go to the newer addition that's on that end, that has the plastic pipe,
that would be
stays the
capped at
same.
that point.
So I guess you have to define that wing, but it's the old section of the building, that wing.
Right.
When the
Correct.
line goes through those doors and changes material type, we're thinking is we're capping it there, let that continue to flow, and then the rest of it will come back towards where that clean out is, where the bathroom group is, and then go out through the outside wall there, so that we don't affect your front entry. And as Greg said, can keep it shallow, and I'll stand up at the mic, and keep it shallow so that we don't have to undermine, existing walls. And, we're fighting a water table that's probably a foot below that slab right now. Part of the reason why we're trying to figure out timing and when we can do this is normally winter your water table's down and we'd be able to do it without trying to de-water in the middle of your school.
Right.
We're still kind of thinking that way, as opposed to springtime when it kicks back up. So we'll continue to work as a team, figure out what is the best approach, and look forward to you guys with what we think it's going to cost, but also how we're going to attack it.
What do you think the rough timing and all of that is, in terms of, getting through the engineer, then getting a cost, and then
Actually, as of our
a plan?
conversation today, we're 2 to 3 weeks for something back from the engineer, and then I think I heard it's gonna take a week or two.
Yeah, I don't remember when our next meeting is, because this one got pushed. It's probably too soon from today to say we'll have it all together.
I think you're a good
We'll
month out
continue-
before we have it together.
We'll continue to work on it, and at the very least, you'll probably hear, Al, you'll hear about it during one of the job meetings as we get around the holiday, Christmas time. And then we'll be able to bring it here probably in the January.
Okay.
My notes could be incorrect. I put down that the new silver line pricing would be in 2 weeks. That's what I heard this morning.
But I think
That's
that
incorrect.
the engineers, we're not gonna price anything until we've put together an idea or concept.
Yeah.
We need them to work out a few of the details, then we
Yeah.
can work on it. But we don't wanna go put numbers to it, and they say, no, but we need to do this instead, and then we're going backwards.
Yes.
To be clear, the cost for this is anticipated to come out of operating budget funds, not the project budget. So that's the ultimate goes to the school board, because this was never in the plan, but it's a repair that we would have had to make one way or the other. Acton would do the work, but the cost would come out of operating budget and or capital reserves.
I guess we can bring that up at the school, but I'm not sure if we're not gonna get priced till January, how that would get worked into our budget. Would we just
It
put
would
a?
be this year, so it wouldn't matter. We'd be paying for it this year or out of capital reserve, which you can draw at any time, the board can request.
Okay. Thank you.
So, like I said, it's get to the engineers and we'll get it as soon as possible, but it's several weeks away before we start even seeing some of the preliminary design work, just because the scope of it is very different.
I don't know if this falls in project updates, but we have a new boiler at the high school, temporary, outside, that ultimately will find its way into a permanent place.
Well, that boiler won't.
And we're gonna have some issues, I guess, in the interim that we gotta deal with or we're experiencing now. Can we just give folks an idea of what's going on there and
So-
how we're attacking it?
Yeah, what we're running on is a temporary boiler that's in a trailer, which was the intent through this project to begin with. The boiler itself had some issues, and been working with the the vendor who supplied it through their service contractor, working on it to identify the problems and correct the problems. Myself and the vendor yesterday spent about 4 hours going through and testing and adjusting and making some changes, and it did not go out this morning. We had to get some parts in, which were installed today. We got a few more things here and there to work on it, but we think we've got the issues with the boiler taken care of. The other issues is we're still dealing with the old system that's half a control system still somewhat functioning, that's not really accessible, valves that are 30, 40 years old that are failing, and air in the system. So as we have these problems with the boilers, it kind of increases the visibility problem when we talk about we have a classroom that might have, or an office area or something that is struggling with heat, and we're trying to address those also. And they may a completely different tact. You know, we may have to replace a valve. We may have to make some temporary heating installation to allow to keep that space clear. But most of that is really, in that area, is due to the fact that we are dealing with a very old system that is in rough shape.
And those are perennial issues that have been recurring for a long time, different rooms, different valves, but the same theme, that we're dealing with antiquated systems, and that's why they're being replaced. You know, we've looked at, we have one room we think that has been consistently cold, that we will add temporary heat to. I think the unusual factor this year is we got snow in mid-November, so we had an early cold snap, but these are the typical kinds of issues I've seen in my time here, and Chris can, I'm sure, say that the heating challenges at the start of every heating season, where certain rooms don't work, or you discover that a valve has failed, or you have to, you know, replace parts, that is something this district has been dealing with for a decade.
Is it a matter of degree, though? Is it the same thing, or is it, I'm just trying to
Has
understand.
it continued to worsen over the 10 years? I would say yes.
Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with, you know, valves that fail, and we talk about, you know, we had 2 rooms that were not heating. We get those 2 up, and we had 2 more that went down. Each room had a different issue. And, you know, you had a valve, you got one valve that has something stuck in the valve, you got a bad valve, you've got air in the lines, so each one's different, and we're trying to get to the solution. In one room we're dealing with right now that there's no solution, and it would be an expensive solution, so we're gonna install some temporary heaters in that space, which are it's a much better plan, because we don't wanna install, you know, thousands of dollars worth of work, and then we're just gonna take it out this spring. So we're coming up with more cost-effective methods to control the temperature in those space accurately and keep that comfort for learning.
So one of the issues was the boiler was shutting down. Do you think we've overcome that?
Right now, I feel a lot more comfortable after spending all the time I spent with the boiler, that we've found the majority of the problems. You know, like any of these things, a temporary boiler is a temporary boiler. The boiler that was brought in, and there's not like a lot of companies who make these, by the way, that truck them out, but the boiler that's in there is a 1969 boiler with 1978 controls. So, you know, you're still dealing with an older system, but it's a temporary system, and that's the nature of those
As part of
those
that, do
systems.
they provide some sort of maintenance agreement or contract? Or?
Yeah, the Ekman has supplied this through AAA boiler, mechanical boiler, AAA boiler out of Connecticut. They have subcontractors that do the service for them located in different states. So we have a gentleman who is in northern New Hampshire who does their work. He's come down 3 times to work on it. He came down this morning with the replacement parts that were identified from yesterday's survey. The boiler that's in there it's referred to as a Cleaver Brooks, which is a brand. It is a OEM style only boiler, so when it comes down to parts, you have to go to the dealer to get the parts. So it's not, we can't go to a local wholesaler and pick up the parts we need, so that does create some challenges. But that being said, I think once we get all of these fine little things worked out, which I think we've got a lot of them, it should be a relatively decent operating system. They're known as bulletproof boilers, so I mean that's why they put them in these temporary trailers, because they're known to be workhorses.
And we've also had the conversation that if these repairs don't take, and this is a problem that persists for another week, that we'll be replacing that boiler likely during the December break, because it's not a 2-minute
It's not a
flip.
flip a switch.
No,
But of course,
it will take a week.
The cold weather that came in fast, instead of us seeing some of this under
Gradually.
better circumstances, it hit us hard. And we were dealing with, I know Danny was over the weekend several different times, he'd come in to check on it, make sure, just to
And
make
our
sure we didn't have
custodial
a problem.
staff
It's
was there.
never been down for an extended period of time, but once it goes down, it takes a little bit to warm back up again when they kick it up. But this morning, we didn't have the problem, we'll continue to monitor, and if we have to deal with it differently come break, we'll make some adjustments.
And the replacement parts that we identified from yesterday were installed today. And a few more adjustments were made. So it's running right now. It was running this morning. We are looking at it every single day right now, to basically put eyes and hands on it as necessary until we can feel really comfortable that it's not going to continue to create issues for us.
Any other questions on project updates?
Crosswalk issues? Can we
Well,
leave it-
that's a good one.
Okay.
So I can give you the heads up. Yesterday, I installed the new lights, the new signs, tested the operation, and it is fully functional. I got an email about an hour ago from the New Hampshire DOT inspector. He is planning on coming by in the next few days to inspect the installation because it does have to meet their requirements. Thus, where the problems came from our timing-wise. We had to order the new style lights from the factory, which was a 6 to 8 week lead time. But we were able to work with our vendor, Marlin, to kind of basically pull some off of the assembly line, if you want to call it that, and get them to us at a quicker rate. It still took a couple of weeks. The lights are a different flashing pattern. They have different indicators. They're auto dimming, which is all required under the new DOT specs. New signage, as you can see, is actually slightly a different color than the sign that was there. That was also per DOT specs. But they are functional and meet all of the requirements that we were asked to do, subject to their inspection.
That said, as I explained to you when I walked in, Ann, you still have to press the button. So the 6 young men who just crossed in the dark after basketball practice would still have to actually push that in order for it to light up.
And that was part of DOT's requirements, I assume.
well,
No, that's how they all work.
That's how they all work, okay.
Automatic crosswalks, you have to hit a button.
Okay.
But crosswalk lights in and of themselves are not the only piece of the issue, right? You still have to look both ways. You still have to be mindful of the fact that people have reaction time. So just the fact that you instantaneously push the button and the lights come on doesn't mean that someone on a snowy evening is going to be able to stop in time. So that
Absolutely.
educational piece is still important.
It's impossible to make a system foolproof because fools are so ingenious, so.
True.
But we're happy to be able to report that they are back in and are operating as DOT asked us to do.
Somewhat relatedly, I understood that the town was going to put a new, I think, an LED light on the pole there.
That has been done.
That has been done?
Yep, and we also, and part of this, there is 4 floodlights that were mounted on the front of the, as we call it, the art building or the Perkins building, depending on who you are and what you want to call it. And those were literally just a switch operated, and so they were never on. So we installed a timer that automatically turns the lights on early in the morning and at the end of the day, so that we have lighting in that area which was dark prior.
We don't have enough experience yet with the new setup, though, to find out whether it's made a significant impact on car travel through or anything like that.
I don't. I mean, it was there for some years before. I imagine things will return more or less to the way they were, but I don't have a good answer.
The increased number of them would just
Right.
slow things, the increased number of them would slow things down.
Number of uses?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I'll just reiterate what Meredith just said, though. I think it's definitely an improvement to have those lights out there. But I think, Meredith, what you were trying to say is 6 kids just crossed without using it?
Correct.
Okay, so you've got that issue. You've also got the issue that, drivers can just be inattentive. Those lights could be on all day long, and you'd still have people texting or, on the phone or not paying attention, or it could be rainy. They can't see them very well. So it's important for folks who are using those lights to understand that you need to use the lights, but you also need to look both ways, as we've always been told from day one. So. Anything else on updates? Okay, let's go with a monthly report, right?
Sure, let me just pull my package of that stuff out. Here. As we go through this project, we do keep pretty accurate records of all of everything we have to, obviously. So what you'll see here is that we have a current cost to the project, as well as encumbered amounts and remaining balances. Some of the balances are projected, as we know that we have expenditures that need to go against that. So this afternoon, I actually worked with our accounting department, who spent a lot of time kind of updating and making sure everything that I had and everything they had was 100% in there, or accurate. So the long and short of it, right as of now, without the new entries that we'll have to put in the next few days, we've encumbered everything but $1.6 million, or spent everything but $1.6 million at this point. That is the latest as of right this minute. It's hot off the presses, to be honest with you, which is a different number than you'll see on this monthly report, because the monthly report was done at the beginning of the month. The new number is actually the end of the month. So we are still holding our own. We've got about 5% in the project right now that has not been expended. There are some monies that do have to still come out of that. We are still projecting about a $250,000 to $270,000 non-encumbered or earmarked funds based on our projections. We do have some projections that are going to be updated this next month, such as unsuitable materials. We're going to readjust those figures, which is actually going to lower that $150,000 number that we originally had. And we've got a few other things that we're going to be removing from the cost projections as we've been able to either get those hard prices in or put those other pieces in other areas. So this report at the time that we had with all the projections, again, showed $278,000. There was some approvals today, which dropped that to about $250,000 is what we're looking at projections, and that's still where we're at. The 1.6 is really more reflective of the stuff that we haven't booked in yet, and or costs that haven't been encumbered.
So in simple terms, the total contingency we started with was what?
Well, we had the total contingency, including CM's contingency as well as our contingency, was $2.76 million.
Okay, and the school's contingency?
The
About 1.3.
The 1.3 million, $1.381 million was our contingency.
And of that 1.3, we have $278,000 left.
The $278,000 also includes owner FF&E and equipment costs that are in there. So between all of those items and soft costs, we have $278,968 minus what we just approved as we met this morning.
Okay, so we started out with 1.3.
Yep,
We're down to about 250.
We're about down to 250 now.
correct.
Well, you
Which
started
does
with about
include-
$3.4 million with all the contingencies.
Yes,
Yes, and that also includes all of those projected costs that we have.
but I think it's important to note that we are whipping through our contingency. It is getting real skinny at this point. I think that's.
Yes, bearing in mind, though, that out of our contingency, Greg's already encumbered a lot of anticipated costs, so,
As he should.
yeah.
Yeah, my projected contingency expenditures right now is $585,000. That is not in that 1.6 million. So For
So
instance,
out
like I
of
said,
the one
unsuitable.
point three, 585 plus 250, we really are less than halfway through, because we're anticipating that we're gonna spend down that amount, but right now, we have not spent it.
But let's try to be clear
I-
about this. This is our best guess of where
Correct.
we are today, including things that we have projected, one of which you've been pretty liberal on perhaps, which is the 165. You think that may be, but.
That may be more than we need. That is that's undefined change orders that we just don't know at this point.
But I just want to be really clear, that's our
Yeah.
job, we've done the very best we can to anticipate and include contingent costs. We have $250,000 left.
Correct.
1.3. That does not include the sewer system. It includes a small number for the sewer system.
Yeah, includes about
So we are-
50 grand.
Yeah,
for the
so
sewer.
we are squeaky clean on, squeaky close.
Yep.
Again, I would not anticipate taking that from project funds. I would suggest that you look at that from operating budget or
But if
capital
we had-
reserve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good, yeah.
So, we are moving forward, and like I said, we're hitting a lot of the goals that we had planned on. We've had a few things come in a little higher than we planned on, but we also had some things come in lower. So, it comes out. I know that, and I use the unsuitables where I had 150,000 projected. I just processed some that were approved this morning that actually is considerably less than the 150. So, we do need to retain some funds in there for remaining site work that has to be done, especially more out front of the elementary school, as a lot of the unsuitable material issues that we had at the high school are addressed or in process of being addressed.
Are we still planning on meeting on the 20th of December or somewhere around that
I
date?
think it's the 18th, if memory serves.
It just seems that there's not that things are gonna settle, but some of the issues that we talked about tonight that are still a little fluffy, we'll have better information for on the update we have on the 18th. The sewer should be a little clearer. And,
Probably not the sewer
Sewer
until the
probably won't
January
be.
meeting.
We won't see that until probably, that's a solid month from now.
Any more updated information than we have tonight.
Say that again?
On the sewer.
Yeah.
There's not gonna be more updated information 3 weeks from now than there is tonight.
Okay.
On anything or the sewer?
Not enough that's gonna really affect. Your point being, there's not a lot of contingency left. We learned this last time, or we talked about it last time. Learn is the wrong word. We talked about it last time. We have to pay attention to what we authorize for alternates and other things because of that. And we'll continue to monitor and make assessments as we go forward. They do it on a weekly basis as they're doing now. And we'll keep that in mind. It's just important to not think of the things that you dream or may want at this point, because as you can tell, the money's tight. We'll continue to run the construction site and monitor everything from there.
Not that things are going wrong, but it's very possible based on some of the
Everything's
issues
going
we
well.
have outstanding.
Things are
that
going
by
as planned.
The meeting in January will be sort of really have used our contingency. Or some of it may be.
No, we're not gonna walk in January and you're gonna find out that 250's now gone. A lot of what we're doing now, because we're in the new construction and going up, it's less risky. The site is a big risk. Your existing structure is a risk. But when the steel's going up and something that's been newly designed and we've gone through the shop drawings, it will go. The type of problems that happen there are a lot smaller in nature. Your foundations are in the ground. That type of stuff is important pieces. Where you're gonna see some more is when we get back into the dirt again, or when we get in your existing building and we start to figure out some of the problems that we have that you couldn't know until you opened up those walls. So I don't know that a lot will change between now and January.
Okay, but we're not out of the woods with the foundation.
We won't be out of the woods until we finish.
But just to clarify, that's through January. Once we go into existing buildings, and open walls and so forth.
That's
Maybe-
when we're gonna start seeing again.
So this is not where close to being home.
Oh, God, no.
Yeah,
That's what I was just saying, is
Yeah.
we're not gonna feel comfortable till we're done.
Right.
You know, the 250 is a number that we'll continue to monitor as we get into it, but there's times in a construction, especially in a renovation, that the risk or the time when contingency comes in becomes more important, or you use it more, as opposed to, like I said, the new, when you're going up, and we have a new wall system that's designed, with more control.
What, it's not a concern, but it's something I'd like to feel more comfortable about. I'm not sure we can tonight. But if we reach the point where we've pretty well used the contingency, and we may have to start think of what things may we have to not do in order to finish most of what we wanted to get done. I wouldn't want to start all those things and then find out we sort of burned money on trying to do something that if we had a little bit of foresight, we would have said, let's not do that because we're not going to be able to finish it.
Which is what we had talked about, why we kind of put the brakes on alternates and things that were part of a wish list as opposed to in the original program, because we, as a team, said we're not ready to expend that because of the risk we have.
And the other areas are also some of those FFE costs, right? Some of the furniture pieces, right? That we have currently still some funds budgeted for those, but we could come back and say, we're gonna need money for this, we're gonna put a hold on those items. There are still some of those in our FFE costs.
Yeah, my concern would be when should we as a group start speaking about, let's take this a step or two further with bad news, and not that we're gonna get it, but let's have that discussion about what's the priority and where we may have to trim a few things. What are the first couple of things on that list for us to think of, so it's not a crisis or a surprise?
Yeah, well, let's give it a few months. But
Okay.
Yeah,
again,
you're not at that
while we're
point
in
right
this
now.
new construction, let's continue to move down the path and give us a little bit of time before we
Okay.
get into that.
So relatedly, Russ, something I heard tonight about the elementary sewer solution, the possible use of funds external from the construction budget. And that's something that I think the school board can, at least at a high level, in the next month or so, understand better and maybe we, because we have just $50,000 on here now, it may be that we take that off entirely if we use those other sources.
From a personal basis, I
Yeah.
just like sort of exploring the dark side of the moon before I look to see if the sun's coming up in the morning, so. I just think it's useful to think about, can we see what is trimmable sometime so we don't get surprised. So,
Good point.
believe me, fingers and toes are crossed that,
Anything else, Greg, on the monthly?
Not necessarily on a financial, I do have some cost estimate things to go over, and a possible alternate on siding material.
That's number 4, or D.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I wasn't ready for you then. So, we have a couple of requests that we had from the last meeting. One of them was, there was a discussion regarding painting the elementary gymnasium in a different pattern type over the tectum panels, creating more of a layout type of painting instead of just the standard, one wall color kind of thing. That was reviewed by Banwell last time. That was placed on, I don't want to say hold, but it was put on, let's get a price on it. So in order to do that painting that was discussed at our last meeting, the cost estimate is $8,212 to do that additional painting, should you desire to. The other item that I had was, we also were asked to take a look at generator conduit installation at this point for the high school. So I just got this today also, and so we're looking at, if we put the conduits in the ground at this time, it's $6,682 for that generator conduit run. It does not include the pad, the transfer switch, generator. It's just literally running the conduit in the ground.
So, on those two, so that, I'll take the conduit first. The nature of the request back, I don't know how many weeks now, but, was on the assumption that it would have to go under a paved area, and therefore you'd want to get it in before you pave everything. But that assumption
No,
no more. And so this can be done later?
It can be done later. This is an item that, once we got looking at it and made sure we can meet certain clearances from the building for code purposes, we're able to keep it in a grassed area behind the high school that does not impact touching the paving. It would only be digging up dirt, and we're talking loam and seed again, you know? So it's a much different scope at that point.
So it may make sense to defer that for now. And in terms of the painting, you know, I would love it, but I mean, we just got done this conversation. And of course, you can always do painting later. You could do this painting later, I suppose.
Oh, yes.
And, you know, so it doesn't seem terribly prudent to do that now, as much as we'd like to have it, and it looks great, and it's a great idea and all that. Maybe we do it at the end of the project, but I don't think it makes sense to do it. Others?
Agreed.
Agreed.
So I'll put both of those on hold status.
You have another item?
Yeah, I have one more. I'm just writing my notes. Don't wanna forget to do that. The last item I have is, it was brought up by a contractor to look at a different or an alternate siding material that could save us some funds. And I'm gonna have Jeremiah, you have the samples, right?
We also have just a couple of images so you guys can just refresh your memory on where it's going.
So basically, this is changing from one product line to another. It's changing from a different material basis. And it does indicate about a $24,000 credit if we go with the alternative material.
Ekman's provided you with a couple samples and some images. What was proposed, as Greg mentioned, was by the subcontractor. And it's called Hardy panel. Most people are familiar with that. It's a fiber cement panel. Excuse me. And I'll just pass around these two samples. What is already in the project, what was bid and what was specified, is an American fiber cement panel. And there are some differences between the two products that I'll explain. I'll just pass these around. The Hardy panel is the light colored one. They both come in a variety of different colors. But there are some specific differences and a reason for the difference in cost. The Hardy panel is, it's not a through color panel, it's a fiber cement panel with a factory finish on it.
Hardy's the white.
Right, so it comes with a factory applied finish. On our past projects where we've used it, we've painted it, but Ekman has told me that they're comfortable with the factory finish on it. And it's more of a low density product. It's made up of different binders than the high density panel, which is the darker one, and you can kind of tell the difference in the quality just by looking at them in terms of the darker one is much more dense. It uses a PVA binder, and you know, using the Hardy, we've used it on many projects. But it is a lesser quality product. It's, you know, it is susceptible to freeze thaw. You know, it can absorb moisture through the cellulose binders. So there can be some degradation of the product over time. Could involve more maintenance. And it's also detailed differently. The Hardy panel requires these edge trims to protect it because it's more susceptible to damage. The other one can have exposed edges, so it's also a slightly different aesthetic. They both will have exposed fasteners applied to them. I'll just pass around these trims. These would be needed with the high density.
Who best among us would be able to assess all those trade-offs? Because I'm not comfortable myself being able to look at samples and say, yeah, here's the positives and negatives, but for your project, here's where we come out making that.
So really, part of the question is, how long does it take, or how long would it take before you spent that $24,000 in part, right, in terms of maintenance? That's really the
That's certainly
trade-off
one of the
cost,
questions,
right?
yeah.
That's part of the.
Or that you'd have to replace it earlier if our environment here would make it suspect to absorbing that extra water that may require some replacement.
If you look at some of the studies that are out there, the panel itself, depending on the weather and freeze-thaw cycles, starts to show somewhere around 7 years and out to as much as 15 years where it starts to show some of the breakdown. The other issue is that the panel being basically a painted panel, that surface can break down and show scratches, chunks, things like that, whereas the other panel being a much higher density is also a solid color. So as we go through that, it's the same color. If you gouge it, it's the same color.
At some point, the hardy panel will need to be painted, you know.
Yeah.
Where the other high density does not.
The only question I would
Is it
have-
gonna be up 30 feet, 20 feet?
Well, it's up fairly high. I mean, you can see in this image, we're using it in some different places. Mostly we used it back where we didn't need relieving angles to carry masonry, because it's a lighter product. We didn't, so it was over low roofs and things. Around the back, we used a lot of it. But it's visible from the front in some areas, like up along the roof edge in between windows. This is the music wing here, and here's another image of the front, so you can kind of see this panel look, kind of wraps around.
What is the 24,000 represented as a percentage of what we would spend with the higher product?
What was the overall cost of the
Yeah.
product? I actually don't know.
About 10%,
I think,
John was saying.
Okay.
So 240,000.
you know, I think,
Mike,
top of my head, I don't know exactly.
Russ, I may be able to help you with it. At the site meeting today, I asked that question with the contractors and the architects there, and I got a really strong vibe from them that they would prefer the higher quality product.
yeah, I mean, just listening to this and admittedly not being anywhere on the technical side, if you're talking about risks being absorption and possibly more maintenance versus a 10% savings, and this is a critical component of putting it where you need it, et cetera, that 10% doesn't really excite me as saying, gee, I could stand up and say, let's save money, but here are the risks that we're throwing into a 10 to 15 year.
And that's what this was. I mean, the higher quality project is part of the project existing, right? The effort was
Yes.
just to see if money could be saved with a different.
We just want to suggest it.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, no, and I
You can do
appreciate
whatever
this.
you want, but
Sure.
knowing and hearing some of the concerns we had last meeting, when the opportunity was there, we wanted to at least present it. And we'll continue to do that if we come up with other things. Doesn't harm
Absolutely.
that
Yep.
You have to accept them or not, it's just, I feel if we don't at least let you know, then we didn't give you the opportunity to make a decision.
You guys are doing your job, and I expect you to continue to do it, and I appreciate it. On this one, it just sounds on the surface that the risk-reward trade-off,
Sounds easy.
at least so far, it doesn't make sense. If you guys can come back with a better technical analysis and say we're not giving up much with this.
I agree with Russ on that.
I would-
Yeah, it's not like we strongly dislike the product. I mean, there's a reason why we specified it and recommended it.
Yeah, no,
It's definitely appreciated, though.
Anytime you can come up with any of these, please do.
Okay.
Move on to.
Yeah. What are we on now? selection of finishes for junior, senior high school edition.
Excuse me.
Chris, while we're waiting for Jeremiah to bring that up, do you want to maybe introduce your student representative?
I would love to. Ms. Mia Smith was a part of our meeting with Jeremiah and Banwell when we decided to select finishes. We put out to our student government to give us great representation for the student body for the duration of this project, and Mia's done that many times, so Mia Smith, grade 10 student, will be joining us henceforth. Thank you, Mia.
So this is a continuation of the first, well, the last building committee meeting we had, where we discussed the finishes for the additions. This is a continuation of that. Since then, we have approved and released the finishes for the additions, the floor finishes, and for the final, the VCT and the tile. We had to do that to keep on schedule for the additions. So this is looking at the rest of the project as a whole. As Chris mentioned, after the last building committee meeting, I also met with him and a few students to gather some input from them. Took some of that input and worked it in to come up with a little bit of a different approach than what I presented last time in terms of the paint colors. We also have collected the remainder of the finishes that weren't presented last time that are a part of the existing portion of the building that weren't in there through the submittal process, and I'll point those out. So the board from last time has expanded. So I'll just flip through the presentation and explain these. We brought a PowerPoint instead of the boards because there's a lot more things to look at this time, and we just thought it would be easier to view this way. And just for context, it's helpful, I think, to start with a view of your existing school. And there's a few different themes going on, for better or for worse. I think, from Chris's perspective, for worse.
It's
In
eclectic.
fairness, Jeremiah, I represent the students, and one of our rival schools happens to be blue,
Yeah,
so they want that gone,
right.
and I would support that.
So, yeah, what you have here, in the school portion, you have a lot of light blues. And some darker blues here. And then in the athletic portion, you have this sort of cardinal red with black. Those are the Newmarket colors down there. And, I got the sense after talking with Chris, that, they want a new approach. And it's just understandable. So, I'll just go through. Here's another couple views of a couple classrooms. I believe this is in the older section of the building, the 1925 wing, where you have a two-toned approach here with some wainscoting, very similar to what you have like in this room. And then we produced this diagram just as an overall view of the floor plans, this one and this one, just to explain, the concept. This isn't representative of exactly. This is just like a color key, and for the accent painting. And I know you hear me out, Chris. Here, I know you said you didn't want blue here, but
We.
okay, all right. So we have changed, the locations of some of these colors, and this is a different approach than we presented last time. And one of the themes that we had that we presented last time was a wayfinding approach, a way that you could identify, different areas of the building because it's quite a big school with a lot of different corridors and things like that. One way to wayfind or identify different portions of the building from one another is to have them represented by different colors, and we thought that was important when it comes to differentiating high school portion versus the middle school portion versus the core areas versus the restrooms. So that's what we've done here. And our thought is that, and after I explain the colors, I'll go into the floor patterns, show those which are very in line with what I presented the first time, which are very neutral, so you're getting your color really from paint. And our idea was that we would represent the core areas of the building and the areas that were used by both middle school and high school in a red color. So we have the lobby, we have the cafetorium, and some accents in the corridors, and some of the areas that are used by both middle school and high school, such as music, weight room, tech ed, family consumer science, and in the stairwells, as an accent on the handrails to introduce some red. And we also thought we have some blue here for media center, and just as an accent wall, not similar in color or how it's organized now, as an accent for the middle school in blue and an accent for the high school in green, just to tell those different areas of the building from one another. And the bathrooms are in yellow, so it's sort of like you know what area of the building you're in when you see those. And this is just a color key of the upper floor plan. It's similar, core areas, stairwells red, bathrooms yellow, and then differentiating high school from middle school. And it's not like the entire corridor would be painted this color. I have some images to explain it a little bit more. These are the floor patterns, and I've already presented these for the addition, and you can see the floor choices here, this neutral palette here, where you have that sort of entrance doormats and the accent wall as you enter the building in a different tone. And then we have where you can see a line of color that represents where we would propose, an accent color. If it's not shown, it would be a white. So you can see, a yellow on this grouping here. And I think previously we were showing like a red and a blue in the bathroom. We changed that. And we have ceramic tile in the bathrooms. You can see the ceramic tile choices here. These haven't changed. And neither have the resilient base or the floor colors haven't changed. That accent blue is this blue, which is a different blue than you have now. And here is an image of the addition where we've changed the color of the accent in the core area here. This is the red, and you can see the floor pattern changes in color. And I'll just flip through these. This is the upper floor. You have some blue accent in the middle school and some green accent in some of the high school areas. And one reason we personally like the idea of maybe a green in the high school areas because it's more of the historic section of the building where you have a lot of like wainscoting and stuff. And if that's okay, we were thinking that it would be, sort of like the reverse of this room and having the wainscoting and trim painted in the green and have everything else white. This is the lobby where we have tile shown in there, and this was a different treatment. This was an alternate that was approved, which I think will be nice. And this is one thing that you haven't seen, is a two-toned tile. It's a larger format. It's like a 2x2 square tile in the lobby and entering into the cafetorium. And here's the cafetorium floor pattern, which is a rubber that was also approved, and it's these smaller squares here where you have the lighter color, and then you have this red. And I think it makes sense to associate the red accent wall color with this red flooring in that area. In the stage, that's painted a matte black, pretty much everywhere. The media, I have an image of that to show you as well, which is carpet, and the admin area is also carpet, and that's another sample here that you haven't seen. For for this interface product here. And just to go through all the rest of the selections on this board, this was the plastic laminate for the cabinet faces. This is for countertops. We needed to select another slip-resistant VCT on the ramps to go with these colors. So here's an image of that, similar to a neutral color here. This was the gray rubber that's used in the stairwells. This is the walk-off carpet in the vestibules. Quarry tile in the kitchen, sort of this grayish color. Toilet partitions, we're showing this color, and then this is solid surface. So this would be the color for the windowsills, and we also have another solid surface color that we're thinking would be nice for the countertops where we've called for it in the media, and there's some benches that are scattered around in the corridors. We would like to use that color on as well. And in the paint colors, the red core, this is a typical wall color. These are the two accents for the two different sections of the building, the toilet rooms, and here's another color for hollow metal frames. So here's a couple images. This is at the sort of the event entrance area. You're looking into a chorus room here. So this is where we would take advantage of some of that red core color. This is an image of like a middle school wing where we have an accent wall, and that carries into the other side of the classroom there. You can see the floor pattern change and just an accent wall there.
Excuse me, Jeremiah.
Yep.
On the accent wall in the classrooms, I just wanted to point out that the students had a lot. These were some of the places where the students really sort of put a lot of input in and had a lot sort of good ideas.
Yep.
Jeremiah provided some great templates, but these kids really kind of put it all together. It was pretty impressive.
But they're willing to accept some form of blue in some locations, or is there an anti-blue?
It's a certain blue, and we've moved past it.
Okay, so the blue we're seeing here.
This blue is approved.
Yes.
That was my
See, I
guess.
wasn't sure. I was a little nervous.
What we're seeing here is representative of something the students have input into.
It is not
and are
epic
okay
blue.
with.
Okay, I'll say the word. It is not epic blue.
Okay.
So you were just
great.
taunting.
I was listening to the masses.
Yeah, no, but I was seeing blue, and I was
Yes.
just saying in my own mind, is that still offensive? And if it's not,
I think we settled on this, right?
Well, this is a
Maya?
good blue.
We're good.
and the students are okay, okay.
Yeah.
Here's a bathroom shot where we have some ceramic tile on the wet wall. Sorry for this image. It's kind of misleading. The tile it's a dark tile, so it feels like there's no floor. But and that blue was carried into the media. This is where you have the carpet, and we have this colored soffit above. The media center opens up once you get past this, but there are some rooms as you come in. Here's an image of the corridor in between the media center on this side and the cafetorium on this side. This is one of those benches I was talking about, like window seats that gives the visual connection into that cafetorium.
For perspective, that essentially is the wooden hallway that currently exists. So if you go back to that last picture,
Yeah.
that carpet there is what looks like that sort of bowling
Yeah.
lane that goes down the middle of the building.
Yeah, it's excuse me. Yeah, it's in this area here. And the image of the cafetorium. This is one place we really tried to make special by having this be a maple shiplap down low, and then we have this acoustic. It's like a smooth acoustic finish on the walls here. With you can see the red rubber. This is an image of the lobby of some of the tile that was approved. You see the larger format tiles. And we also did a little, just a short little video. I got this program downloaded, so hopefully this will work. first start, but. A little choppy, but you get the idea. Some display cases flanking the, so it's gonna be much more open than what you have now, because we're taking out a lot of those rooms.
I love the fact that we have student input and they recognize, I hope, that they can be blamed by the younger generation of students who come up and say, who chose these colors, you know, so.
So I hope this is okay.
There's always something.
The only other finish I didn't bring up was the weight room. I think I presented the weight room rubber before. We have to pick a locker color. I was waiting for actual sample chips because just the color and printout of the options was kind of difficult to select a color from. So I'd like to share those with you so we can at least try to match what you have now, or because the thought was that we would go with a gray locker, and I think that's okay to go with kind of a gray floor and gray lockers if in some of these areas we have like an accent color to sort of break up the monotone color palette.
Jeremiah, I assume all of this color selection and so forth and color alternatives are within our budget.
Yeah, these are all stuff that was specified, and there's no upcharge for any of these specific
So the
colors.
fact that
It's,
we're doing multicolors here and there is not a,
I don't believe so. It shouldn't be.
They'll moan and groan and complain.
okay.
Yeah, well, they gotta expect not to have one color throughout the
Yeah,
whole
yeah,
book.
yeah.
I think the documents let them know that there would be some.
That's it.
Great, thank you. Looks great.
Looks good.
Yeah.
Love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to the students.
Okay, yep,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you, and it was great to have some input too. Appreciate meeting me and
We ain't gonna have to rule
So are we done on colors?
Done.
you tell me.
He's excited. It's color.
Yeah, as long as I don't have to pick them. I'm good.
I'm there with you.
So,
Yes, kids, and it gets done right away.
anything else we need to cover for tonight? All set. Okay, I guess the next meeting's on the 18th, same time, December 18th, 5 o'clock here. Thanks, everybody.
This is
Thank you.
I got a brainstorm here, just a minute. We had a discussion weeks ago about outlets and so forth, outlet colors and so forth. Does that all fit in with what you're doing?
Yeah,
somebody
we already
picked-
selected those, and they're just neutral colors that